Good day, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. Well, I have a typewriter here that you probably haven't seen before. This is a 1949 Smith Corona Silent. This was the first year they made this particular version of the Silent, and it's been sitting in its case on the floor of my garage underneath my workbench for a couple of years, and there's a reason why that is. And I decided yesterday that I would look at it and see if the typewriter still works. I did service it a couple years ago, but it's been sitting in an unheated, unair-conditioned garage for a couple of years, and I'm kind of curious about whether it's going to work. Stay tuned. Well, the case was covered in dust because it had been sitting underneath my workbench for a couple of years. It was just caked in dust. So I used some simple green to clean up the case, and it came out pretty good. But the case was already in pretty bad shape. It has some marks on here, like paint marks, scratches. The bottom corners of the case are in pretty bad shape, and that's the way it was when I first got it. And surprisingly, the inside of the case was actually pretty clean. Hardly any dirt or dust got in at all. And the case is the style of case that preceded the holiday case. So it still has the brackets for attaching the typewriter to the bottom, and it has a single lever on the left side for releasing the typewriter itself, and these two brackets here. And it has this green fabric lining that was actually in pretty good shape. I had forgotten how nice of a typewriter this was, and it's actually in better condition cosmetically than my Silent Super. It has a really nice brown tone to it. What I like about it is the paper table up in the back is also brown, and of course the knobs are matching, and even the space bar. And then you have, contrasting with that, you have the light and dark green keyboard keys, which is interesting. I like the shininess of the Smith Corona logo here, and it sort of has a slight brown tone to it. I think it's just picking up some of the light from the rest of the paint, but it's very nice, appealing typewriter. One thing I notice is the ribbon cover. It doesn't have any scratches on it from, the typical problem with a carriage return lever. Even the front corners on the paint is really in good shape. Surprisingly so for a 1949 typewriter. And the logo on the back of the typewriter indicates this was the very tail end of L.C. Smith and Corona as a manufacturing name. They switched to Smith Corona probably about this time period. So this might have been even a transitional model. This machine also, though, does have a few condition issues on the back, where you would expect the paint to be peeling where the bracket inserts in the case. This is common with these machines. But it also has a little bit of wear on the paint here in the right rear as well as on the left rear. And that's really about it. On the back of the carriage up here, maybe a little bit. But the front of the machine has a very clean appearance. Well, this machine was originally sold to a teacher who was going to use it for his classroom in a school district in northern New Mexico. And he did so. He used it. And then he contacted me maybe 6 or 9 months later and said, hey, there's something wrong with the typewriter. It looks like somebody bent some of the keys. So I got the machine back, and sure enough, somebody, obviously students, had mangled some of the type bars so the keys weren't sitting straight. And you think about the amount of force required to do that. That's a lot of force. But I was able to rebend the type bars back, and surprisingly, they work fine. The key levers, they work fine. The type bars aren't bent. The type slugs sit normally. They operate normally. There doesn't seem to be any problem with the linkages or anything. So whatever abuse this machine took, it surprisingly was able to be fixed. And anyways, after I fixed it, I notified him and left a message at least, and I was unable to get it back with him, so I figured, okay, well, I'll just store the machine in the garage until he calls me back. And I think I've made an attempt to call him several times since then. Haven't heard from him, so it continues to be not really my typewriter, but I guess I'm the caretaker of it. And I was very impressed, however, with how well the machine worked. sitting in an unheated garage in the winter, unair conditioned in the summer. So the machine has seen a lot of temperature fluctuations. It gets in the upper 90s Fahrenheit in my garage in the summer, gets down in the low 40s Fahrenheit in the winter. So actually, it did quite well and right out of the box. But it does have the really hard platen. And I did swap out temporarily the new J.J. Short platen from my Silent Super into this, and it works quite a bit better. And obviously, if I was going to keep the machine, I would want to get a new J.J. Short platen. But I did find a temporary fix for it, at least to get a decent imprint out of it. Let me show you what I did. Well, this imprint on just cheap printer paper is not that good. It's okay, and the ribbon is actually not too bad. It didn't dry out all that badly, surprisingly. But one of the things I noted with typewriters with marginal imprints is the kind of paper you're using has a lot to do with how good it types. And of course, this is just printer paper, as I said. So what I've done with hard platens is I've used a sheet of construction paper as a backing sheet. So this is an example of just the kind of construction paper you might get in the craft stores or whatever. And then I've been using this newsprint paper. This is Strathmore's newsprint paper, and this is art paper for sketching on, and it comes in a 9 by 12 inch size, so I cut it down to 8.5 by 11. But if you look here, it looks really nice and pretty good, actually. A good imprint, which is what I want with this machine. So I think just having this extra thick, toothy, fibrous newsprint paper backed by a piece of construction paper for this machine, it makes this super hard platen, it gives it a decent imprint, and it makes it usable, and that's the important thing. So sometimes you do have to play around with not only the kind of ribbon you're using in a machine, but the kind of paper and whether there's a backing sheet, like I say, especially with a hard platen. So this, even though it's an early version of the Silent, it still has the quick disconnect feature on the platen like that. But what I noticed is the rollers. I remember when I took off my Silent Super's platen to get it recovered by J.J. Short, I believe it had either 3 rollers or it had 2 sets of 2 rollers, like a set here and a set up front. But this one only has a single set of 2 rollers, so it's kind of an earlier version of the 5 series, apparently. There's a difference there. However, the rollers do appear to be in pretty good shape, and there's no flat spots, and they feel resilient. I can kind of dig my fingernail into them, and they do feel nice and soft. So I don't think I'm going to be replacing these rollers or the rollers on the paper bale, but the platen is certainly glazed and very, very hard. You know, it's really nice when these texture paint finish typewriters have good paint. There's just a certain look about it that I really like. Here is that Smith Corona logo that has an interesting patina to it, which I think really is attractive. Well, I think we should throw a piece of paper in here and just do a little test typing and see how it looks. It does have an interesting appearance to the imprint here using cheap paper. For instance, the left side of the lowercase o is a little bit cut off. Probably it's type bar alignment. Who knows how much wear this machine has seen. Well, so if you are going to put a machine up for a number of months or even a couple years in an unheated space, I think one of the lessons here is I obviously had cleaned and degreased the typewriter sufficiently ahead of time so that there wasn't any residual old hardened lubricants that would have been, especially in the cold, would have been really hard and caused the machine to hesitate and lock up or the type bars be sluggish. So adequately cleaning and degreasing is certainly the key. I obviously put in a fresh ribbon before I gave it to the guy, and so the ribbon is still in good shape. I think typewriter ribbons the ink is probably oil-based ink of some kind, so it doesn't really evaporate that quickly. And I've certainly seen typewriters I found at thrift stores where the ribbon was literally decades old and still had an imprint. So a new fresh ribbon should last you. Keeping it in the case is real important. and that in this case, that was very important to keeping the dust out of it. The typewriter was hardly dirty at all. The seam around the lid of the case is not hermetical, but it is tight enough to apparently keep the dust off the machine. That was really good. So this is one of these things that is about portable typewriters, is they do come in cases, and they're oftentimes, as my friend Ted Monk reminded us this last week on the Typewriter Club Live, is that oftentimes portable typewriters with cases are in better shape than larger full-size upright standard machines, because those standard machines didn't have cases. They weren't protected. These often do get protected in their case. So I think the lesson is doing adequate maintenance, degreasing, cleaning, making sure it's in really good shape before you put it in storage is the key. And also, I had forgotten, I hadn't used a 5 Series machine in a while. It's been a few weeks maybe. Forgot how good these are, actually. Just the touch on them and the ergonomics of the keyboard. These are just great machines. One of the best machines ever made in America as far as a portable typewriter. Probably the best American-made portable typewriter, I would venture to say. Especially with the feature of being able to remove the platen. And in this day and age, that means being able to easily get the platen sent off and put new rubber on it, which if I end up keeping this machine, I probably will do that at one time. 1949, Smith Corona Silent, the first year that this series of typewriters was made. And the serial number of this is a 5S series. So this is the 5S series. 1949 was the first year for it, and this is very early in that production run. So it's kind of cool. I like it. And so a forgotten typewriter in my collection, or not really my collection officially, but a forgotten typewriter around the house. It's kind of fun to rediscover these once in a while. Well, I hope you guys discover for yourselves the joy of creating with typewriters. And as always, stay well. Have yourselves a great day. Bye-bye for now.